session for Wednesday, October 16, 2019. Review of work session discussion meeting minutes.
Don't have any?
Department head report. We know you got.
I left my hood and sith at home. I'm here to answer any questions if you might have them, if I can.
Do you want to just briefly discuss the event that happened over the weekend?
Sometime between approximately 5 p.m. Friday afternoon and 7 a.m. Saturday morning, there was a urinal up on the second floor that was continuously running, and it flooded out the side of the courthouse over here from the top floor all the way down to the basement floor. The elevators are affected. A lot of drywall, ceiling tile, carpeting, flooring is affected. ThyssenKrupp, the elevator company, was in yesterday. There's significant damage to the elevators. We have been in contact with firefighters, sales and service, about the fire alarm system, because there are some units that are there. We are going to get them in as soon as we possibly can. But the good news there is, if there were problems with that, it would have sent a trouble signal to the panel, and we haven't gotten any trouble signals. So we're hoping that the fire alarm system is okay. But they'll get here hopefully within the next, today, tomorrow, to test everything and look at it.
I haven't been there. The fans still running. I haven't been over there.
The fans are still running. They have holes drilled, trying to, I guess, they took samples to see what's up inside with the bones, so to say, and they left the holes open to get ventilation through there. So I will talk with, his name is Luke. I'll talk with him shortly and try to get another update for you. Then I'll share it with you through email.
Thank you for alerting the entire board of the events that happened and keeping us informed. That's so helpful to us, me, and I'm sure them. Dan relayed pictures and events that were happening as it goes along so that we can make decisions. So just wanted to let you know that we have a really good director here. And thank you.
Thank you.
Any other department head report? Hearing none. Solicitor?
Last week, you asked Mr. Camp, and I told you I would look into whether or not we were required to run an elevator in the parking garage pursuant to the ADA. I did look into that, and we are not, so long as we have the required number of parking spaces on the street level, on the street level parking garage. And for the number of total parking spots, which is 249, we have to maintain 7 handicap spots. So long as we have 7 on that street level, I believe we are okay. And so that's one of many possibilities to fix the drainage issue.
How many do we have now?
There are 7.
And we could even add more if
Yeah, and we may want to, if we do go that route, we may want to think about moving them to the side of the parking garage that's nearest the courthouse. But so long as a disabled person would not have to go up too much of a slope or down too much of a slope, we're fine.
Yeah, but before we do anything, you have to run it by labor and industry to make sure, because when I'm sure back when that building was built, they had to go through approvals, and the plans had to have stamps on them, and it might have been, because I remember something vaguely about building the garage, and some of the commissioners were for the garage, some of them were against the elevator, but for the garage, and
Yeah.
But I know that all had to be stamped and approved. So
Sure.
even though that we can bypass that, we still have to double check to make sure it doesn't violate anything.
you spoke with, was it Widmer,
Yes, sir.
about potentially fixing a drain, they believe there's a way to fix
Yeah,
a drain without
we believe we
putting.
could, if need be, we could add more drainages too. I mean, it's something that, unfortunately, I mean, we're not gonna be able to handle that in-house.
No, yeah.
It would have to be, put out for bid and contracted out, but, there's places that we can add more drainage.
Okay. All right.
Just a quick question, because we're running into that timeline where we did sign a work order to continue with this, with Schindler to make the repairs. And it was about 2 weeks ago, they said that they were about 2.5, 3 weeks out. How should I handle this with them? Just contact them and told them, put the brakes on for now, or what?
So we want to look at the drainage before we fix the elevator, put us right back in the same situation we could
Yeah.
possibly be at.
Well, we probably want to look at the drains before we fix it, so if we could put it on hold and then,
I will do that.
I would be okay with getting the wheels going on, at least maybe figure out how much a rough cost would be to fix the drainage before, I guess.
We talked just amongst ourselves, and it's just throwing numbers out there. We're thinking we can, it's under 100,000.
What's changed with the drainage for the past 20 years? Why now?
I think just the amount of rain events that we're getting, Commissioner. I think we're just getting these heavy downpours that we're getting now in the spring. If you go up there and look at it, and I know I don't know what the formula is, but I know that there's a formula to figure out how much area you have and how big of a drain that you need. And I'm sure that was all taken into consideration. But you only have 3 drains across where that slope comes down. There's 3 drains across the backside wall, and they're all just round, 12-inch, and they go into probably 10-inch to 12-inch pipe. So we think if we make those larger and add a couple more right in front of the elevator shaft, that it would be sufficient.
And the pipes been cambered? I mean, is there a possibility of clog or?
We could check. I mean, I think, it's nothing puddles there, nothing, whenever.
Because 10 years ago it didn't do it, 20 years ago when it was built, it didn't do it. What's changed? Was there an event that caused gravel and slag to go into the pipe and clog it?
We can certainly have that televised.
I don't know what else to say about it. Before we spend $100,000,
Yeah, I mean, maybe look at that and then also then start looking at getting the figures.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other department head report? All right, solicitor?
Just the only thing to add to our report would be we need an executive session to discuss a personnel matter.
Any questions for the solicitor? Board of Commissioners?
The only 2 things were the flooding and the drainage of the elevator out of the garage, so we've covered that.
The budget schedule for us is, they've started with the department heads, October 9th through the 17th with department heads. And Cindy, you tell me that there's a public viewing on 11/21 and approval tentatively on 12/12. Does that sound about right to everybody? Okay.
If nothing comes up, that will move it back toward the end of the year, so it'll be not so.
What's the first one?
21st.
11/21. So, aren't we at CCAP?
I think CCUP's the fall.
The following.
It's later. It's right before Thanksgiving.
That
Weekend
weekend.
before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
It's the 25th, you'll be away.
And Thanksgiving's later.
22nd.
It's the 25th, 26th.
And will we be able, we'll have a draft before then?
The commissioners.
The commissioners will. Okay. Okay. And yesterday, I attended the Conservation District. Dan was there, and they were talking about, there is a leave of absence by the director, Shaner, pending a dismissal, from what I gather. And in the interim, they've made the financial administrator the acting director for a time period of until they find someone. And it was noted that the Syrup Festival is not going to be run by the Conservation District. So I'm asking if the board can meet with the Conservation District and maybe the chamber gathering, recreation, tourism, and DPW to put our minds together to try and pull this off for the spring. Because what they're saying is that there's already people, vendors and things that are rolling in, and the planning should have started already, and it makes me a little nervous that, and I don't know if the answer is that the county helped do this. Maybe it's that the Syrup Festival take a break for a year. I don't know the answer to the questions.
Would that meeting have to be advertised?
No, it'd be informational.
No, I think you're just probably trying to get information as far as what needs to be run or what would need to be done in order to run it. So no, you just gather the information at that point, and we'd have to come back here in order to make a formal decision.
I'm not sure. Sometimes we're not allowed to be together. Other times it's okay. I still haven't been able to figure it out in this term, so that's why I questioned it.
Yeah, I know the Conservation District has definitely, did they reach out to me yet?
No.
Okay, I know they said they were gonna reach out to me yesterday and before, because if the county or tourism or whoever may want, be interested in taking the Maple Syrup Festival, there's a lot of equipment that falls underneath the Conservation District.
Right. That whole sugar shack is filled with equipment.
Yeah.
They have condensers and such,
So.
and it's on our property. We lease it to them. It's just a kind of a mess that needs to be.
So there'll be a lot of agreements that need to be
Yeah.
made.
Yeah, we can't make it without their equipment, even if we wanted to.
I'll reach out again to that.
Anything else?
I've been getting a lot of PennDOT notices. Looks like PennDOT is doing some slides and some roads here coming up towards the fall. I know, Davine, you printed something about a $1.2 million slide that they're going to be doing in the next year. I just want to let people know that before you go traveling out, make sure you know that the route that you're taking is open. That's it. Thomas?
Any other business? Hearing none. Audience participation?
Laura Lee Bernke, the Beaver County Genealogy and History Center. I thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I printed you out some information. It's basic information, history, finance, some facts and figures about the center, some of our current needs and issues that we have to address. As you can see by this, we have no reliable source of income annually. Our sources vary from year to year and from month to month. So after we lost our funding a few years ago, we've been constantly trying to raise money to pay the rent, to keep the lights on, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the facts and figures about the center: when we moved down to Beaver 6 years ago, we went to an all-volunteer staff so that we could use the funding that we received from the county to pay our rental fees per month. Since that funding has been cut, then anything that we can raise donation-wise, we have to use to pay the rent. Some facts and figures: between October of 2016 and October of 2017, We've had over 500 patrons use the center. Over 120 of those were from out of the state, and over 40 additional ones were from outside the county. So anybody that comes to the center, they're gonna contribute to the local economy for food and housing and tourism and shopping and things like that. I don't have any more recent figures in that, but we're working on it. And overall, I have seen an increase in attendance this year, so I'll be anxious to see how much that has changed. As I said before, we have an all-volunteer staff. There's 16 people on our staff now. Each one of those people puts in a minimum of 6 hours per week volunteer time just to keep the center up and running. The majority of those people put in a lot of additional hours, either at home, at the center, or at other facilities, groups and organizations. Some of our biggest problems right now, aside from being locked into that 10-year lease, we have 2 computers that are out of date. In September, we had Dr. Beasley and Joe West from the courthouse come to give the presentation on the census. We had to use one of our staff members' computers. Not only one, we had to end up using 2 because the computer that we use for speakers doesn't function anymore. So that was rather embarrassing. I'm sure Commissioner Egley can attest to it. It was a bit of an IT nightmare that night. So not only that, we have filing cabinets and things like that that need to be replaced because they're kind of falling apart and what have you. And we can't plan for the future because all of our income has to go to pay for today's needs and things. So I'm approaching you to see if there's something we can do as far as restoring the funding.
What's the amount that you would like to be requesting?
I think the commissioners have been giving us 15,000, but I think 10,000 would be great. It would help us to replace the equipment that needs to be replaced and help us to plan a little bit for the future. One of my nightmares down there, I have about 30 shelves of books. These have all been cataloged using the Dewey Decimal System, which is great. That's the way a library catalogs things, except for our center or one subject. So if you come down there and look at the materials on Pittsburgh, you'll find books on about 12 different locations on those shelves. So we need to find a way to better organize those to make them more usable for patrons. So that's one of my nightmares at the moment. I'm talking with some of the librarians in Beaver County to see if they can offer some suggestions with that. And I know you've been down there doing research, Commissioner Akeley, and you know when you pull the drawers out, our files are just kind of laying in the drawers. And they get mixed up quite easily and out of order. So I'd like to see some kind of reorganization if we can down there. Try and make things a little bit easier for people to use.
Is there any way that you could talk to the, who do you have the lease with?
Beaver Area Heritage Foundation.
Didn't they get a substantial grant funding to restore that? And they're a for-profit now, aren't they?
I'm not sure if they're for profit or not. I know they fundraise continually so that they could restore the train station. When we originally signed our lease agreement, it's $1,000 a month rent, and we had what they called CAM fees, which were $500 per month. Since the loss of our funding, we've been able to have them decrease those CAM fees down to $200 a month.
What's a CAM fee?
It's like a shared fee kind of thing. It covers like snow removal, grass mowing, any kind of costs that are involved by the whole area there. I'm a little in the dark about CAM fees myself. I don't think that that was necessary. If you're paying rent, you're paying rent. But it wasn't up to me when the lease was signed. I wasn't president at the time. So they did give us a bit of a break. They cut it down $300 a month, which over the term of the year, it adds up, but it's still quite a lot.
Are you a 501c3?
Yeah, we became a nonprofit in 1980.
I know on the schedule, we're doing all our department heads and row offices first before we take a look at the subsidies, correct? With them, so you did send a formal letter in, correct?
I did. We
Yeah.
talked about this last October when I presented the needs and the funding request then too.
Did you get Was anything allotted to you last year?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, we've had nothing.
Okay.
So all of our monies that have been coming as income have mostly been going to pay the bills. We haven't been able to really do anything else. Okay? All right.
Thank you. Any other audience participation? Mr. Woolley?
I was going to speak in favor of that. They've done a wonderful job in the county, for the county, bringing people in. And I know that there is still some discretionary funds this year, or I believe there is, based on how well the finances went last year. I would like to see if something could be done this year, up to and including perhaps procuring some of the computer equipment for them through the county. So that might help offset what an outside cost would be to get the computers. So I am very much pleading for continued support and to do what can be done this year in addition to next year.
I know that our IT department is converting a lot of our computers to, because of
Yeah, it's
the
a
Windows 10
Yeah,
or something. So we're in the middle of a conversion ourselves, and it's not just like 1 or 2, it's like 60 and 100. So I would say, you know, maybe we could have, but we don't have an extra computer because we're doing the same thing.
So there are none that can be assigned to that?
Not for a computer, yeah.
All right.
but
Well, I know that you're all saying that the budget situation is
Maybe there's some
going
useful life to the
very
ones that we're
Right.
Yeah.
turning in that she could use.
We
Well,
could maybe
they-
check into that with
I
IT.
know
and
that
say-
they completely wipe and clean, so they'd have to rebuild it, and what Kevin Tussick would probably recommend is, it's not worth rebuilding, because you can buy one cheaper than it is to rebuild it, for the time it takes in to rebuild and the stuff that they have to put into it. But there might be something else down there doesn't need wipe and clean.
Right,
So.
I mean, that could be, just so it has the operating systems in it, that they can get out.
Yeah, but our biggest problem is not necessarily computers, it's paying the rent and keeping the lights on. That's where our biggest issue. You can get grant money, and people love to donate so that you can buy something, but they don't like to donate so that you can pay your electric bill. That's the hard part.
Any other audience participation?
Do we have a cost on what the flood damage was over the weekend?
Not yet.
And since we're talking about subsidies, ECBC,
There hasn't been any, I think we're still finalizing some of the contract negotiations, correct?
Yeah, there's still 3 contracts that are out there that aren't finalized. And just added that we have contacted the insurance company about the elevator.
Anything else? Okay. Jeff?
You know, I was gonna say something. We have a meeting at 11:30. If your executive session isn't gonna be that long, I got the 2 people that are gonna be with me, they're here with me. We could wait. You know how long that was gonna be.
There's not a lot to discuss at the executive session, but it's sort of a bigger issue, but I don't think it's going to be the longest executive session we've ever had.
Okay.
Well, it's only 10:30 now. So I think we'll be okay.
You'll be here somewhere in the building, right?
Probably in my office.
Okay.
All right.
Any other audience participation? Will we need to reconvene from executive session?
No.
All right. We'll go and, during the meeting, go into executive session.